Lisa Kreider, host of Connect Hampton Roads. Today we're talking about the future of public transportation, and joining us is Roy Keenitz, Vice President of WSP. We're going to talk about the Transformation Project. HRT is taking a blank slate. We want to look at redoing our system. What would that look like? And today we're going to talk with Roy about the project. Roy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now I understand we are ready to talk about 3 different scenarios that the project team has come up with. But before we dive in, what are some key points to remember about these 3 scenarios?
What we're looking to do is say if we have the current amount of service, the same number of buses, the same number of drivers operating for the same number of hours, could we deploy them differently, different places and different times a day in a way that would create more ridership of the public, more patronage, more revenue, and a more efficient system?
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive right in. What would scenario 1 look like?
So scenario 1, what we did is a very simple modeling exercise where we just looked at what are the locations where people live and where do they work, where are they going, what type of system would that generate, and compare that to what we have today. The way Hampton Roads Transit has worked since it was created 15 or 20 years ago is each of the jurisdictions in the region decides how much they want to pay and how much service they're going to get. And that means you have a high service density in some places and a low service density in others. So we've just decided, what if there were no jurisdictions? What would the service map look like just based on where people live and where they work?
A true regionalism approach.
Exactly.
Now, what would be some potential results of that scenario?
So far, the initial analysis shows that we would see potentially a significant ridership increase, mostly by redeploying some of the buses to places where we have higher densities and a higher likelihood that people are going to choose transit, and that the effect would be positive.
Now, higher frequencies is something a lot of riders would love to have, and that would get us into scenario 2. So tell us how scenario 2 would look.
Right, so scenario 2, we said, what if we just had a high frequency system? We concentrated our buses just on the major routes that have the most ridership, the most density of residences and jobs, mostly along the major arterials, and ran at least 15-minute buses every 15 minutes throughout the entire length of the day just on those routes. But once again, we're not buying any new buses or hiring any new drivers. It's just taking the same stuff and redeploying it. We also found that there would be probably increases in ridership with that one, but also there would be significant areas where, in order to increase those frequencies, in some places you have to take away from other places, and so there would be significant areas where people would lose some of the service they have.
And that makes sense. I mean, each of these scenarios has to have positive and negative impacts.
Exactly.
Now, scenario 3, I believe, is mostly to do with maximum coverage. So tell me a little bit about that option.
Yeah, in scenario 3, rather than emphasizing frequency on the busiest routes, we would emphasize on getting some form of service to as many people in the region as possible and sort of spreading out the service even more thinly than it is today. More people would have access to a bus route for scheduled service, but some of that service would be once an hour or once every 30 minutes or something like that. And so low service frequency, greater coverage, and what we found there is probably ridership would actually go down.
That makes a lot of sense. It's tough, folks don't want to have to walk or take a bike ride that's more than like 20 minutes to get to a bus stop. That would be difficult. Now, what else about these scenarios? Anything else you want to share with the community about these that's important to know?
So the stage we're at right now is we've created these 3 fairly different options, and we're assessing how they would likely perform. There's a whole set of public outreach that then is going to go on over the next 2 months or so about going out and showing people what we are finding. Then in the summer, we're going to narrow that down and to try to create the one most optimal potential future service map that combines the best features of what we found in other places and maybe some new innovative service types, like on-demand services you could order through your phone. And then we'll create that scenario and then go around and show that to people, and then that's potentially something that HRT could debate about whether they want to adopt.
Could adopt it. That would be so wonderful. Roy, thank you so much for your wisdom and for joining us today. We're super excited about this project and especially to share it with our listeners. So thank you again for tuning in. To get the latest information, simply go to transformtransit.com and stay up to date and follow us on this project. But importantly, we want you to get involved. We're going to have a series of small groups happening in May to discuss these scenarios, but also in May will be public meetings in each and every city in Hampton Roads. It's so important we have your feedback. So thanks again for joining us. Stay up to date, and until next time.